Good evening, everyone.
Hello, my mayor.
Hello. My name is Jared Nicholson. I am the mayor, and I just want to welcome you all and thank you all for coming. Thank you to our Inspectional Services Department who set up this space and everyone helping out to make it work. I'm joined by some colleagues who will speak in a minute, but want to recognize other folks that aren't in the program. City Councilor at Large, Brian LaPierre. Chief of Police, Chris Reddy. And then the Chief of the Fire Department, Dan Sullivan. So the plan is for us to just kick it off briefly, myself, the state delegation, and the council, to then hand it off to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and their consultants for a relatively brief presentation, and then to open it up for questions. One of the key things today is that there's a sign-up sheet in the back there for folks to share your info, and you can also specifically request for those of you that are abutters, someone to come out to your property specifically to answer your questions that are particular to your property, to get your questions answered. That, honestly, is the overarching goal tonight. We absolutely recognize that there are a lot of questions about this project, and that's why we're here. The questions are important, the questions are valid, the questions are welcome, and we want to walk through everything. I think there's a particular set of questions around the whole, the concept of the temporary easement and how that works. And so our partners at Mass DOT are going to specifically touch on that.
Can I just ask something fast? Is this already set and we're here for no reason, just to listen to us quicker? Is it already set in stone, or can we change it?
So the question is, first I would ask, for the most part, I think it's going to be helpful for us to save our questions for the end so that we can get through the presentation. And the question is that the overall design is set in the sense that this is the project. They're absolutely open to feedback and questions. That's why we're here.
Why are we here if it's already set?
Ma'am, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate everybody being here. So thank you. Well, we appreciate it, nonetheless. So we know that there's a lot of questions, and we're going to answer those tonight. If there are issues that we can fix, we will try to fix them. We've gotten feedback as recently as the last couple weeks that we were able to make some changes to accommodate. You'll hear more about that later. And so we're doing everything we can to make this a successful project. The goal is to help the neighborhood. The overarching goal is public safety. As you're going to hear tonight, this intersection that we're talking about sees 16,000 cars a day. It's incredibly busy. It's also dangerous. Legitimately dangerous, and I mean a risk to the public. To the driving public, to the walking public, to the biking public, to the transit-taking public, and people are getting hurt. There's 25 accidents a year. It's one of the top 200 most dangerous intersections in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We don't feel that it's right to sit idly by when our residents are being put at risk. That's why we're here. We also recognize that this project is going to affect the properties that abut the work. And we want to work with you. We want to work with you, one, to answer your questions, because a lot of what's happening here is that there is confusion about how some of this is going to work, particularly with the temporary takings, the temporary easements. And we believe that we can answer a lot of those questions. There is certainly going to be a level of inconvenience for some of the work that we will need to work through together, and thinking about the scheduling and the impact that that has. And there are gonna be some parts of this project that are challenging for some of those individual folks. And again, we wanna work through that with you. Part of that is through communication. We recognize that this communication needs to be improved. Tonight is our best effort to start that in a genuine, open, and transparent way. I think we hope to set that tone where you can ask the questions that you have on your mind, you can get that specific, catered answers to your particular property in the days ahead, and that we will establish that cadence of communication so that as the project moves forward, you'll know what's happening and when and why and how it'll affect you. I really do appreciate all the folks that are here tonight. The communication's most effective when we have folks that are able to listen to what we have to say and give ourselves the opportunity to do the same for you. And we can only do that by getting together. So I really do appreciate everybody being here. So before we get into the presentation, I would like to invite Senator Crichton to say a few words. Thanks.
I don't want to repeat too much of what the mayor had always said. First, I want to thank him and his administration. I know we have former Mayor Tom McGee here as well, who had worked on this project. Thank you for paving the way to the Chief Reddy and to Chief Sullivan and all of our public safety officers that are here as well, to Councilor Lozzi and to everyone who's worked on this project. Folks that know me here know that I, since being off the council, don't weigh in on many local issues. In this instance, it's a state issue as well, and one that the state is very committed to focusing on, and that's public safety of our roadways across the country, but also here in Massachusetts, we are seeing some of the highest most dangerous crashes across the state. It's the reason why a project like this has been prioritized as communities across the state compete for a finite amount of resources for these types of projects. I'm blessed or cursed to now be the Senate Chair of the Committee on Transportation, and what I've seen there over the years in terms of roadway funding is that we're not doing enough. And for the City of Lynn, it receives a lot of money, and we are the envy of many of my colleagues that serve in the legislature. Why did Lynn get this much money? Well, the truth is in FY 2023, last year, our road money, road and sidewalks and streets, was roughly $1.5 million. That's across the entire city of Lynn, to fix every road and street and sidewalk. This project, almost three times the size in terms of how much it would cost, would make a dramatic impact on a roadway that all of us know is unsafe and needs to be fixed. So I'm here as your state senator to support the project because, again, at the end of the day, it is a public safety project and one that we as a state need to do better on. And I think the City of Lynn has done a laudable job competing for this money and continuing to find other projects and other intersections that meet that criteria for these pretty impactful resources. With that, I'm going to, again, thank all of you. The reason you're here is so that we can hear from you. So you don't want to listen to politicians, so I land the plane. With that, I turn it over to another politician, Rep. Dan Cahill.
Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to make 2 points to echo what the mayor and the senator said. With respect to cost, a $5.5 million project such as this size would never be able to be completed by the city on its own. So we're cobbling together 20%, I believe, state funds and 8% federal funds to be able to do this project, because other than that, these types of projects wouldn't be happening. And I would just like to talk about the process. Much like the Linfield process, the Linfield Street project that you're seeing underway now, very similar. We had there was early public hearings in 2018, many years ago. Everything got interrupted by COVID. And two things came out of COVID. One, a tremendous amount of federal funding became available for transportation. So a lot of that accelerated a lot of these projects. And with that, that's why we're seeing two major projects, about $12 million in investment, all within a couple of hundred feet of each other. So with respect to the Broadway project, we're having this community meeting here today. With Linfield Street, same thing. There was meetings, there was an interruption, letters went out to abutters. Abutters had questions, a lot of questions. There was a public meeting here, many of the members of CRC residents that were at that meeting were here as well. A lot of angst, a lot of questions, they were answered, and I believe that everyone left that meeting, for the most part, feeling much more comfortable about the project. So, we've had no challenges from the Linfield Street folks. So it's important to know that you'll get your questions answered, very similar to your neighbors on Linfield Street. I think we can all agree that that is a critical project that's long overdue. Where that to have stalled would have been just detrimental to the entire city. And we believe that after hearing from the professionals here today, that you'll have a better sense of what they want to do in that roadway and some of the improvements. So I'm going to turn it over to the Ward 1 City Councilor now, who will be the last politician you will hear from until the Q&A. Ward 1 City Councilor Wayne Lozey.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out. I'm Wayne Lozey, I'm the Ward 1 City Councilor. I've been the Ward 1 Councilor for 20 years. And this is probably the fourth state project that I've seen in 20 years. It's been in the works for 5 years. It's very important to the City of Lynn. It's very important to the neighborhood for all the reasons that we've heard tonight. I just want to point out that as Dan mentioned, Linfield Street is a recent process as well, and people had very similar questions and concerns, and I mean, right up to tonight, there are a lot of people out here that do have concerns and questions. I'm confident that we're going to answer them, or we're going to address them, and hopefully we're going to satisfy most, if not all of you. And I'm going to remain here after the meeting. If you have any questions, concerns, please come to me and talk to me. Again, just want to stress the importance of Senator Creighton mentioned $1.5 billion. That'll do about 20 streets. Divide that by 7, that's 3 streets per ward. This is what I deal with every year as a ward councilor. I get 12 to 15 requests for new streets every year, and we're getting about 3 or 4 done a year. So it's very difficult to get money like this, and I hate to see this not come to fruition. So again, without belaboring this, thank you all, and look forward to the next step tonight.
I'm not giving another speech, I'm just introducing Rich Benevento, who is representing Ty and Bond, who is representing the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're going to go through the project from beginning to end tonight. We will be here as long as necessary to answer your questions. We want to make sure that the information that maybe you heard, we clarify some of that information. There's been the big discussion about easements and eminent domain and all those sorts of things. And so we're going to explain those tonight so you can fully understand them. I can understand you get a letter in the mail, hey, we're taking some of your property. Well, you know, anybody, the first thing you'd be doing is getting on the phone to your lawyer and saying, hey, what's going on? Temporary easements and things like that, and we're going to get into it in more detail. Those things are so the contractor can do his work. It's not necessarily we're taking anyone's property. There was no eminent domain on this project. There's none of that. In terms of...
That's not true. That's not true. You take my property by eminent domain. It's not dealing.
So you know what we should do is we should probably try and do this in a civil way so that we can all get everyone's questions answered and we can provide the information that you need. Eminent domain actually occurs when an aggrieved property owner does not want to grant an easement, and then there's that process where you can actually come in and take somebody's property. That's not the case here. So we just want to clarify, this is some of the things that we want to try and clarify tonight when there's information that's going around. you know, gee, Rich Benevento had a hangnail, and by the end of the night, I'm amputating my arm at the shoulder, right? We don't want to do that. We want to get all the information out so that you can understand what's going on. Two other things. There are plans here. We'll be happy to talk to any abutter on the project afterwards. And as the Mayor's Chief of Staff mentioned, there is a sign-in sheet where we will then meet with you personally to go over what effects may be on your property based on what the project is. We have, I'll introduce my team. Alan Cloutier. Alan is a professional traffic engineer and a professional traffic operations engineer. We have Chris Surratt, who's a professional civil highway engineer, and also my colleague over here, Bill Murrens. Bill's vice president at Ty and Bond as well. We do these projects all over the Commonwealth. This is not anything new. There's often folks come out, they're worried, this is going to ruin my life. We're not here to ruin anyone's life. We're here to make this intersection safe. You heard the mayor talk about the high accident occurrence at this location. Now, oftentimes we'll go to a meeting and someone will raise their hand, well, I've never seen an accident there. There are accidents here. This is on the top 200 list. It takes a lot to get on that list. Someone said, well, how does that rank amongst all the intersections in the Commonwealth? How many intersections are there in the Commonwealth? There's hundreds of thousands of intersections in the Commonwealth. This one rose to the top in terms of its need for safety. And so that's what we want to try and do. Oftentimes we'll also say, well, no one's been killed yet. I don't think anybody in this room would want to see anybody get hurt out there. I often ask the question, how many in the room think we should do nothing at this intersection? Anybody? So we should fix it. Would everybody agree with that? We should do something to fix it. Improve safety, improve traffic operations. If you're on Jenner Street at 4 o'clock, you're almost to Millard Ave trying to get out onto Broadway. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been in that intersection many times. I was born and raised in Lynn, actually. Grew up in Pine Hill, so I know the area. So it's things like that that we want to do. Is there going to be some effects on abutting properties? Yes. Are temporary easements necessary? Yes. Are we going to be in someone's living room taking their couch? No, we're not. No, we're not. So I'm going to let the design team go through this. We will be here to answer questions. We hope that you would just listen to the presentation. If you have comments, save your comments as opposed to just sort of blurting them out so that we get everybody's comments heard and we get everybody's comments answered. Okay, so Alan, you want to start? Alan Cloutier.
And before I kind of get going as far as the presentation, I want to point out there are a few chairs that are open off to the side over there if anybody wants to see. And also, as was kind of mentioned before, we'll be taking questions at the end. If also anybody has any questions they just want to ask us personally, we'll be around. We have some plans over on the side. You know, you might have a very specific question that you want to know, about your parcel. So, we'll be here as long as needed. And I am an engineer, not a politician, so I usually prefer to kind of be up where I can actually look at my presentation, not standing behind a lectern.
Alan, they're still standing here.
So we can go. So just a little bit of the agenda for tonight, at least for the presentation. We created a somewhat short presentation because we figure it's going to be all about questions tonight. That's probably going to be the main thing that we're handling tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit about the project limits, timelines, the purpose and need, although a lot of people probably, if you're out there, you kind of know definitely the need out there. Safety, I have a little bit of some information from old, that was done back when we did the road safety audit a few years ago, and then a little bit of an update. I looked at some more recent crash trends. The current plan and cost, easements. We'll probably have more slides about that than anything else. Then a little bit of the timeline. And then, of course, it's not on here, but of course, questions. So project limits, of course, we talk about the intersection of Broadway to Euclid and Broadway to Genes, but also it really extends a little bit past Miller Place to the east. It does extend a little past Conomo Avenue on the west, or this is kind of a not really east-west road or even north-south, but I'm not going to keep saying north-east bound. We'll just kind of pretend that north is up, I guess, on this. So a little bit of the timeline as far as how this is progressed. Originally, the City of Lynn was moving forward on the design. There was a public workshop in September of 2018, kind of show how long this has been moving around, sitting around. There was a road safety audit in September of 2018. And for road safety audit, what that is, it is really an examination of the crash history, a really detailed examination. We're actually getting crash reports, reading what happened, reading the descriptions, plotting them out to find out exactly what was happening out there, and then looking at solutions. So it's really a multidisciplinary team. We got traffic engineers like me, you got planners, you got engineers, you got people from MassDOT, you got people from the city, if there's walking or bike advocates. So it's usually kind of a number of people that look at it from different ways, different points of view a little bit. Ultimately come up with recommendations, and then for a project like this that's moving forward, you have to address them. So they're coming out of that became a lot of recommendations, signalized Jenna Street, new overhead signals at Euclid with retro-reflective backplates, curb extensions so that if you're trying to get across the street, it's a lot easier than it currently is a whole list. It's a 3-page list. I'm not gonna kind of delve into all of that right now, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. We've had a few meetings, so it started off with Lynn design and then it moved forward. It ultimately became a MassDOT took over the project, actually funded the design. So there was, once MassDOT took it over, there was a little project kickoff. That was kind of just a small little meeting, what's going to happen, what's going to be needed for this project, more like submissions type stuff, not exciting stuff. Well, it's exciting, but maybe not too. There's been a few utility sidewalks along the corridor. There definitely are a lot of utilities that need to be accounted for really when you're doing the construction. And then there was a design public hearing on December of 2021. That was a virtual one because, of course, we were in all the COVID, restrictions. So it's a little different than it used to be. Existing conditions. So there's a lot of safety concerns along the corridor. So we have really 2 intersections that are high crash locations. I'm going to get into that a little bit. Generally, we kind of have wide, undefined lanes out there, which kind of encourages speeding. And not just speeding, you kind of have some cars out to the left, some cars to the right. If people are taking a left on Genes, people are kind of going around, but it's not really well defined. It tends to lead to crashes, a lot of near misses, and then again, speeding, it starts making it a lot more difficult to cross Broadway. So a lot of outdated signal equipment, I mentioned, so like reflective backplates are actually very effective because it really, I'm sure you guys have seen them around, makes it a lot easier to see the traffic signal. Especially if it's if you might be facing towards the sun during sunrise or sunset, it really helps with that. And it also helps at nighttime too, to kind of see, especially the reflective part. They've been shown to really reduce crashes. It's close to the elementary school and Pickering Middle School. And we've had some discussions with the town here and the people that are working on the middle school. So there's a lot of students that are going to be, that currently and will be crossing some of these roadways. Right now, the pavement condition is fair to poor. Pedestrian accommodations, especially if you're trying to cross Broadway, are poor if you're not doing that at a signal. And then there's really no bicycle accommodations at all in the corridor. So we're really talking about more about safety. So we have really 2 high crash locations, both the signalized intersection of Euclid and Broadway at Jenna Street. When we did the road safety audit, the project area averaged about 24 crashes per year, which is significant. Especially this is not a 3-lane roadway or something like that where you would normally find the higher amounts of crashes. For 2, I say 2-lane, but in some areas it's a little wider than that. Apparently not. We were trying to do that earlier, and there's a couple of nuts back here, and we were figuring if we did, we were probably just going to make it smash on the floor.
You need a couple of engineers.
To hold it up during the presentation.
Quick question on being able to make this available online or in print.
Oh yeah, actually we can provide it. I don't know.
We can put it in PDF format.
Yeah. So, okay, put it on the same website. Yeah, we can put that. So I think I already mentioned about the road safety audit was in September 2018. Identified pedestrian vehicle, and bicycle improvements. Oh, actually, just before we go, so this is actually just a little snapshot of the crashes that occurred over, a few-year period. So every number was a crash. So some of them had multiple, the same type of crashes happen over and over again. For instance, there was a lot of angle crashes of people pulling out of Jenna Street, getting hit by again, I'll call it eastbound Broadway, even though it's northeast bound. That was a very common crash, but really, there's a lot going on in that section. It's not just one type of crash. There's actually quite a bit going on. So I actually looked just the other day at what has happened since then as far as crashes. So I looked at the last 4 years that were available, that's good. So from 2018 to 2021, I didn't look at 2022 because they're still kind of cataloging that. So as if you get into a crash, you fill out the accident report, you send it into the R&B. Sometimes it could take a little while by the time it's geocoded and truly located where it needs to be. So if you ask why I didn't look at, up to June of 2023, that's why I don't want to be looking at that data. So in the more recent 4 years, it was averaging about 28 crashes per year. So it's gone up a little bit. So I put a little chart for those of you who can see it, of course, if you can't raise it. 39 crashes in 2019. It's actually getting pretty high. It dropped in 2020, no surprise. We were all driving a lot less that year. Although crashes didn't necessarily drop as much as the roadway volumes. We started having a little bit more speeding just in general on a lot of roadways in Massachusetts. And then it kind of jumped back up in 2021. Not as bad as 2019, but we were still at, I think, 27 crashes in 2021. One thing that, as I was looking at that, I was probably more concerned about wasn't just the total number of crashes. This is the corridor, not one particular intersection. We had 11 injury crashes in 2021. So we need to get something done. We want those numbers to be as close to zero as possible. Engineers, we kind of have this whole vision zero. I don't know if we can get to zero, but let's try to get as close to that, as we can.
Can you just explain too that 11 injury crashes doesn't mean 11 people got hurt? It means 11 accidents had injuries, so one or more people could have been hurt in that accident. So it's not like 11 people got hurt, it could have been way more than that.
Yes, and some of them could be serious injuries. I didn't see any fatalities, but again, some of these could be serious, possibly debilitating injuries. And probably more important too is moving forward, we want to have very few of those if we can. So we very recently had some conversations with Mass DOT in the MBTA, and this is actually a very recent change. There was a bus stop that was right at the corner of Broadway and Jenna Street. It's there now, but there's also some other ones just a little bit further to the east, we'll call it. So they were definitely a candidate for consolidation. So the plans that went out was a few months ago or so, those show a bus stop right in front of that intersection. We have updated plans. MBTA hasn't agreed to consolidate the driveway, the bus stops. So they're going to be actually a little bit closer to the intersection of Miller Street. Actually, this is a little, you can kind of see the picture. There's already bus stops there on both sides of the road. So it's really going to consolidate them further to that location. Buses don't want to be stopping every couple hundred feet anyways. But what they wanted, MBTA wanted ADA accessibility improvements because there really isn't ramps from the existing sidewalks. And they also wanted to relocate a crosswalk. So we had a crosswalk that was on the, we'll call it western side of Miller Place. They wanted it to the eastern side of Miller Place because that's going to be more likely where pedestrians will now cross, or people who are getting on and off the bus. With a relocated bus stop, that's kind of more the desire line anyways.
Now, Alan, before we get off that, just one other thing. One of the reasons that we wanted to see if the MBTA would be willing to move this bus stop, because there was some concerns about not having enough parking on the street, whether it's for residents or local businesses or whatever it is. So this allows now to establish 6 parking spaces where that bus stop is. So that's a huge benefit for the neighborhood. It's also a huge benefit for any of the businesses in the neighborhood and that sort of thing. because that was a concern, that it would be, now, by the way, the bus stop was there already, and technically, no one should be parking in a bus stop, it's illegal. Fortunately, no one was getting tickets. But now they'll be able to park there without the threat of getting a ticket, because it's now the established parking on the street. So that was a big point of trying to get that bus stop moved so that we could establish more parking on the street.
Yeah, and actually to even build off of that, so there's an existing bus stop there now. The older guidelines, you only need about 50 feet for a bus stop. So the signs, there was a couple signs there. And if people were even following the rules, there was about 50 feet where they couldn't actually park. MBTA has newer guidelines, so to put a bus stop where you're pulling in and out of would be 100 feet. So that was what was shown on the previous plans, was a 100-foot long bus stop. Now that's been changed, again, very recently, since the bus stop's been moved over, now we have more room in that section, so room for about 6 cars to fit in there. Chris, we can probably do that. Okay, so we don't expect you to see much on this plan, but I guess it's kind of a letting you know what we have here. And we basically have the same plans over on those tables over there. So if anybody really, if you're here, if you're budding to here and you want to, see your property, if you have a walkway or something like that that might be affected, we could definitely talk about that. So along the corridor, Chris is kind of moving forward. One of the big things is as we're moving to the intersection of Jenna Street, we're signalizing that intersection. We're going to put in a left turn lane onto Jenna Street, so that way we don't have that sudden moving out of the way. There is going to be bike lanes along the corridor. Over here you can actually see I highlighted that we have room for about 6 parking spaces right in front of the greenhouse. And again, if you looked at the previous plans, this crosswalk would have been over here, so we moved it over to the other side of Miller Place. If you are trying to cross Broadway, so right now you can cross at a signal at Euclid, and then you have some other unsignalized crosswalks, not the most friendly or easy to cross. What we are going to have, so you're going to have, again, signalized crosswalks at Euclid, signalized crosswalks at Jenna Street. At the unsignalized crossings, so we have Broadway, we have further down the other end, over by Konomo, we're going to have a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So those are the ones where it's a sign, you push the button, you're going to have the yellow flashing rectangular light that flashes in a wig-wag pattern. It warns drivers that somebody's trying to cross. They're very effective. Of course, I tell my kids, make sure cars still stop. Some studies showed the rates when they were testing these went up from 17% of vehicles stopping for pedestrians in an unmarked crosswalk, which is ridiculous that only 17% of people actually stop for pedestrians, but it went up to 86%. Huge improvement. Still means, 1 out of 5 that maybe were looking at their phone. So still make sure it's safe before you cross. But I like them as both as a pedestrian. It really alerts the drivers. It's a really effective warning device. As a driver, I kind of like it too, because you know that somebody's trying to cross. So there is none of this, oh, is he hanging out at the corner, or is he trying to cross? So that's really going to make it a lot easier and safe to get across Broadway.
Alan, just one other thing before we get off that one, Chris, we just back up. One of the other things too is trying to cross Broadway. It's a long distance. Now, even though we're going to have a traffic signal there, you can push the button, you'll get a walk indication, and you'll be able to safely cross. Right? In addition to that, we're trying to add some bump outs to the corners, and what that does is it makes that crossing distance much shorter now. So people have refuge from the sidewalk, they get the walk indication, they can walk, and it's a shorter distance across. Remember, the whole point of this project is safety. And as you heard earlier, it's safety for vehicles, of course, safety for pedestrians, safety for cyclists, and safety for transit. So when people are getting on and off the bus and that sort of thing. So these are all features that are included in the project. So sorry, Alan.
No, that's fine. So you can actually see over at the western side of the project where we actually have if you are, I guess, in the very first row, you can see, where we have the curb extension or bump out. So it really makes that crossing a little bit shorter for the pedestrians. It also means that if drivers are going to be turning into one-way streets, they can't do it at 35 miles an hour, they can still make the turn. We do check all that. So I think we'll move forward. I think here is where I'm going to pass it over to Chris. He's going to talk about some easements. Oh, I guess I could mention that. So design and construction is funded by Mass DOT. It's around $6 million right now. It's kind of a bit under, but I think be pretty close. So this is Chris Charette.
And while Chris, before Chris starts, I want to talk a little bit about the funding here. So,
You can all hand me a ring, otherwise? All right, so we're going to talk, I just want to briefly touch on the funding. So the City of Lynn has been very, very fortunate to receive the funding it has been receiving for transportation improvements, safety, traffic operations, that sort of thing. Normally, like the Weston Ave project, how many know about the Weston Ave project? So that project is going from Market Square all the way to Easton Ave. It's currently programmed for funding, because these projects, not only do they have to be eligible for funding, they have to be programmed for funding. Weston Ave is programmed on the State Transportation Improvement Program for $47 million. It's going to be a complete redo of Weston Ave. How many think that's necessary? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Essex Street, from Easton Ave all the way to Rockaway and Joyce. Another funded project by Mass DOT. Currently programmed, not just eligible, but programmed on the tip for $20 million. So between those two projects, this project, Linfield Street, the city is right on the edge of about $100 million in transportation investment for the City of Lynn by Mass DOT, because they recognize the need. Now, with the two projects I just mentioned, Weston Ave, Weston and Easton. It's the only place I know where Easton and Weston are perpendicular to each other, but that's okay. That's another topic we can talk about later. However, Weston Ave and Essex Street, the requirement for that is that the city pay for the design, right-of-way, and engineering. So the city has to have some of their skin in it as well. With this project, Mass DOT recognized the safety need here, and so not only is Mass DOT funding the construction, they're funding the design as well. That saved the city about $500,000 in engineering, because they recognize the dire need to improve safety at this intersection. So again, significant investment in the City of Lynn, and as our delegation has talked about, this is a lot of other communities would be, groping to not be able to get this kind of investment in their community. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. But Chris, here you go.
Thank you, Rich. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight and listening to our presentation, what we have to say, what the project entails. We are here to answer questions. We can work with the city on taking this PowerPoint and posting it on city website, just so that it's available in some form of electronic document to view if anyone has any follow-up or any difficulty seeing this. So far tonight we've heard a lot about traffic, safety, intersection crashes. What we haven't heard about, and what I do particularly on these types of projects, is construction, how it impacts abutters, the highway design. So I'm more of I always say I'm the meat and potatoes part of the project. I deal with the road, sidewalks, curbing, utilities. That's the stuff that I work with. In order to do this type of project with Mass DOT, with the City of Lynn, we need to have a clear right-of-way. So what that means is when we come and when we install a new sidewalk, new curbing, we are replacing the utility pole, we need access to that area, right? We cannot encroach into your property without access, albeit temporary access in most cases. We need that based on the funding sources, and also regulations that are set forth by which we have to abide by to work on these projects. So I'm here today to talk about some of the construction and also how that construction is related to easements needed. So there's two types of easements on these types of projects. There's temporary easements and there's permanent easements. A majority of the easements on this project, I believe there's 80 easements in total, which sounds like a lot, but you gotta think on how densely populated Broadway is, and there's pretty much at least one temporary easement on each property. So there's two types, temporary and permanent. Temporary easements are for when we're out in construction and we need to rebuild the sidewalk that's in front of your property. That sidewalk's in the public way. If I need to step on your property, in order to set a form, in order to reseed your front lawn that's been disturbed by putting in a piece of form to set a sidewalk, I need the ability to stand in that area. And that's what the temporary easement comes in. When we work with Mass DOT on these projects, we have a strict set of guidelines that say, if you work adjacent to a parcel, you need at least 5 feet clear of where your limit of work is for a temporary easement for access. That's very clear, it's black and white, and if we don't abide by that, the plans come back to us, and then I get yelled at because, again, it's another submission of the right-of-way plans, and it's more work for us to do, but it's very clear. They have a right-of-way publication guide that says you need 5 feet beyond the limit of work, you need to provide access, you need to provide room for setting a utility pole, we need to provide room for overhead wires. There's very strict guidelines that it's not just this project, it's all projects that are funded through Mass DOT. So we're here tonight for this project, but Rich talked about 45, how much was Western? $47 million. You take those 80 easements and you add a 0. I mean, there's just an enormous amount of work on the corridor type of that. But again, 2 types of easements: temporary, which we talked about, permanent easements.
Chris, when we get to permanent, I
Yes.
want to mention one other thing about temporary. And by the way, we have a project in Everett on Ferry Street. You know where that is? There were 330 temporary easements.
Yes.
330. The reason they need that 5 feet, as Chris mentioned, again, you have to step on that person's property to nail the form in. You have to have an easement. You have to provide that access. The easement goes away. It's not permanent, it doesn't stay. And the requirement is 5 years for that easement. Now, the project will likely be over well before that. But what they want to do is make sure that the project doesn't gain an easement, and then we come and the contractor, it was delayed, they're trying to get materials, and so we only got a 2-year easement, but now we're approaching the end of 2 years, and now we have to go back and do all that all over. So Mass DOT says the guideline is a 5-year easement. It ends up going away. It's not taking anybody's property. It's just providing access. Matter of fact, I think they're changing the name to access something. They're going to change the name from temporary easement to some kind of access word, because easements worry everybody, right? But again, it goes away, and it's temporary, and it's only to provide access so that contractor can step on the property. Or as Chris said, your front lawn gets disturbed so they can reseed it, put some loam down, maybe they're going to plant a bush, whatever that kind of thing is. They have to blend your driveway, right? So there's a new sidewalk, and now there might be a little bit of a bump. Well, that's so they can come in and make a nice smooth transition, repave your driveway so it blends with the new sidewalk. That's the kind of stuff that we need a temporary easement. Sorry.
One question that we do get a lot, right, is, okay, so the project's X amount of years, 3 years. How long are you going to be in front of my property, right? How long are you going to be along my frontage? That's a great question. I wish I could answer it. On a project like this, it's a complete street, complete reconstruction of a road such as Broadway, the contractor's going to be in front of your property multiple times, right? So if you got to think of it, it's done in stages, it's done in logical progressions. There's a stage when they're doing utility replacements. There's a stage when they're repaving the road. There's a stage when they're setting curb. There's a stage when they're pouring sidewalks, right? So each one of those times, there's a potential for someone to be in front of your property doing that type of work. That's not uncommon, and we work with the City of Lynn, with Mass DOT, with the contractors to say, hey, the next month we're going to be in this section of Broadway doing this type of work, right? So there is an information sharing there. It helps nowadays with the internet and with Facebook and whatever public, 311, whatever information sharing the city uses. We can relay information such as that, but we get that question a lot, right? When are you going to be in front of my property on this project? And it's not a straightforward answer, and I'm sorry. That's the best that I can do and explain on as far as the work taking place and how long it's going to be. But that's why Rich alluded to a multi-year easement. That's why we need to do it, just because of the logical steps in the construction.
Chris, if we get on that, I'm wondering, Michael
Sure.
Pena from
Sure,
Mass
sure.
DOT, want to talk a little bit about property rights?
All right, sorry.
How do we forget about Mike?
It's okay. I was trying to stay quiet. All right, so you got the politicians, the engineers, the bureaucrat. Hi, everybody. My name's Pena. I'm the manager of modernization programs at DOT. I'm the DOT that I keep talking about. We are very closely partnered with the City of Lynn. and your elected delegation and other staff in the city in implementing a project of this nature and of this importance. One thing that I think we really want to make sure we're saying is that when we do takings in whatever form, through easements, temporary or permanent, one of the major roles that we play at MassDOT is ensuring that private property rights are held whole. And I am hot. It was really nice by that AC. Yeah, it was very convenient. So I'm sure that most of you are even hotter. So that means a number of things. Our standard process that again, we oversee all kinds of things. There's 100 of us that touch every plan set at MassDOT. Everyone's got an opinion and everyone's got a role to play. One of the important roles is that of our community compliance officers, overseeing the acquisition of right-of-way and those activities that ensure that private property's rights are held whole. And that means a couple things. It means, one, that you can, the simplest way, be really excited about a project and say, I want to donate this land area for the sake of project construction, and that's a property owner's prerogative. We seek those kinds of forms of donations either in the form of a right of entry, which is a simple, non-legal binding document essentially, or in the form of a more binding temporary easement, something that is confirmed through an order of taking by your city council and executed by the administration. When that happens, when you say, I elect to not donate this, the state, or in this case the municipality acting as the acquiring agency for the right-of-way, is responsible for offering you an appraisal, which is not just any appraisal, it's not just taking some assessed land value and multiplying by a square footage, we hire certified appraisers working with the city and through their DPW department, and assess that the damages that are incurred by our use of that land, either temporarily or permanently. The reason we talk about taking easements for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years is because, yes, MassDOT is notoriously, has all kinds of timeline complications, project to project, whether that's mobilizing a contractor or acquiring the stock that's necessary to actually construct, or just simply having those construction teams available to complete the work in that season. There's a lot of things. We manage a $1 billion construction program every year at MassDOT. And yes, the City of Lynn is one of our major focuses. I'd challenge you, it's a little more than 100 million, we're shooting for 2. The city is one that is in very dire need and is suffering a traffic safety crisis, and we recognize that. So that's part of why I'm here tonight. But I do want to assure all of you that timeline associated with 1 versus 5 years of a temporary easement results in additional appraised damages. All of that is required. That process around appraising the value to the private property owner and then awarding those damages are all required to be complete before we even put the project out to bid for construction. So, and then we do what we call certifying the right-of-way, whereas we have compliance officers that review every single, we call them case files, for every single property, individual property that's affected. There's a whole log of the interaction with the private property owner, with the appraisal, and then the award, a literal copy of the check that got mailed to each of you that are abutters and whose property is affected. So all of that is required to be cleared by us and then by our federal partners, depending on their level of oversight for the project. Chris mentioned this sort of in passing, but this is all private property rights are protected by the Federal Uniform Act and additionally by state law, which provide these requirements for appraisals and awards of damages. We at the DOT are the ones who sort of set that. There's a 5-foot rule because generally our contractors will work in this zone, or we've got an extra ½ inch of pavement on your property. We then take a 1 square foot box for that pavement. Super oversimplification. But that's kind of what we're talking through. During our public hearing, we always have a very robotic message from our right-of-way officers that is famously exciting. I hope I did a better job explaining some of that, but I'll be here to continue answering questions and let you get back to your regularly scheduled program.
Thank you, Mike. So we went through what temporary easement is. Permanent easements are more for a pedestrian curb ramp encroachment, right? If we have a pedestrian curb ramp on a corner and your property line comes to an angle and we need to round that corner to put in a pedestrian curb ramp, we need a permanent easement for that. Because the idea is, if the property owner decides to take out that little piece of slice or that corner of a pedestrian curb ramp, it becomes non-compliant. And if you cannot have a non-compliant curb ramp in a public way, right? That creates an issue for ADA, accessibility guidelines, etc. So we have some sidewalk permanent easements. We also have some aerial and utility easements. So a utility easement on this corridor is such that if we have a utility pole with an anchor, so an anchor, as you see it, it's a cable that comes off the pole and gets moored into the ground. If that anchor is on your property, we have to formalize an easement around that anchor so that when the utility company comes and maintains that anchor and checks on the stability of the pole, they have access and rights to that area around the anchor or around that utility pole. So again, I keep stressing access and the ability to maintain this infrastructure that we're building. That is the point of having this temporary easements and also the permanent easements. So,
Chris, just a point of clarification. That anchor from the pole that Chris is talking about, or that wire that's overhead that crosses over your driveway, it's already there. What happens now with a project like this, because the state and federal funds involved, everything has to be formalized now. So even though that anchor has already been, maybe on the corner of your property, it has to be formalized. So it's already there in many cases.
So we realized that as part of, Michael alluded to the eloquent speech that happens during the design public hearing about right-of-way and your rights as a property owner, and you received a mailing. That mailing is a letter, a simple sketch of the property, and also there's a guide in that letter, right? There's a packet. It's called like the real federal guide for right-of-way that gives an overview of the process. So there is some information sharing on right-of-way easements and how it impacts your property and how we, as the designers, as the city, as elected officials, we need that clear right-of-way to move forward. And we're here tonight to answer questions on right-of-way and answer questions on traffic and safety. And ultimately, I mean, we talked very little about what we're actually putting in the ground, right? Sidewalks, road, bicycle lanes, curb extensions, like all of these improvements for the city and for uses of Broadway, both abutters and also the public traveling corridor. So I think I'll close with that for now, and we can kind of get into...
One thing I want to mention too, if you got a packet in the mail and it had the guidelines in it, and this is where some of the confusion may have been in those guidelines. There's a section in those guidelines that actually talks about eminent domain. And so that's where some of that may have come out, that you're reading this thing and saying, oh gosh, they're taking my property by eminent domain. Those were in the guidelines. There's, as I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, there is no eminent domain on this project right now.
Rich, please don't say that again. All right, if I could have the mic. I'm sorry. I think what you mean is there's no eminent domain when it's typically meant colloquially by that, which is big bad highway department comes in, takes your whole house and gives you $1 and says, have a great life. Right? We do not do that.
Exactly.
That is no longer an eminent domain that's legal. Eminent domain is a legal instrument that cities can apply through the executive branch with authorization through your legislative branch in the form of your city council to authorize an order of taking based on the right-of-way plans and the property rights that we have prescribed are necessary for us at DOT to administer the construction. So, I'm sorry, Rich, I don't mean to make a liar out of you. I just want to be really careful about how we choose words because there will be, we are a condemnation state in Massachusetts. We're one of the few in the country that still have this legal ability to serve the greater public good and authorize the use of an eminent domain legal instrument to take property rights. Again, unlike in many generations past where that was just done at the discretion of the state, it is now done through a very robust process around property rights protection and property owners protection and the preservation of your rights and just compensation as essentially protected, not essentially, but as protected by the U.S. Constitution. And we really now have gotten it right as codified by the Uniform Act by Congress. So I just want to be clear about that. There's no full takings. We're not taking anyone's couch, as you put it. You're gonna like that one. But the city would be executing the acquisition of these property rights through an eminent domain legal apparatus. Okay, good. All right.
Okay, so I think at this point we want to open it up to questions. I will say we have some sign-in sheets at the back. If you're in a butter and you have questions about how this will affect your property, we have these fine gentlemen here from Ty and Bond who will come out and talk to you about the impacts that will have on your property if you want to sign your name in at the back. Understanding that there's a lot of people here, we would ask to keep either your comments or questions as minimal as possible and to the point so that we can get you the correct answer and move forward. So,
Can you please, before you ask a question, can you please state your name and address just for reference?
Neil Bragg at 184 Broadway. So, as the mayor said, it's the most dangerous intersection. But I don't understand why police haven't been there. There's been no police present at that intersection. Why wasn't Warwick Street made one way? Your accidents are coming down Jenner Street.
Yes.
They're running the stop sign. No police to do anything about it. They're running across the Warwick Street and there's your accident. You guys think it's because they're taking a right. It's not. It's because they're running across and they're not stopping. It doesn't matter how much traffic's out there. They're running straight across the Warwick Street. They're taking the back road. I see a cruiser sitting out the back of my house watching so they don't come up the hill for the one way. It sits there, the cruiser sits there, but yet out in Jenner Street, you don't see nothing. Not a thing. You don't see a cruiser in sight come 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. You don't see a cruiser. These people are making 2 lanes going down the street. They're making 2 lanes going to PVDs. People are getting hurt. I'm not saying that something needs to be done. There definitely has to be something done. But putting a bike lane in is not one.
So, well, let me address just, if I have not been that close to this project since I originally proposed it, being taken over by MassDOT with Mr. Benevento and former Mayor McGee, where we agreed to enter in this partnership. I've sort of kept an eye and followed indirectly, but just what I'm hearing tonight is part of the reason why we're proposing a signalized intersection. A lot of what I do at MassDOT is get projects off the ground for problem intersections like this. The signalization of that intersection would deal with that particular issue.
That's
And forgive my familiarity with the geography. Is clearly not a resident, but sorry, go ahead, sir.
That's going to be another year before this even happens.
Well, we're putting it out to the tentative plan, if all goes according to plan. We have the funding for this project earmarked in this federal fiscal year, which means that we reserve it for construction in the next construction season. Yes, it would be next spring.
I'm asking, can we get a do not enter sign on Warwick Street? So you can't go across.
It doesn't matter. We got one at the bottom of Claremont Street.
Well, believe me,
I gotta go that way to go home, so I cut across there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the priority here is safety. So we can't, there's a process to put up a sign, and we absolutely look at that. We can absolutely work with the police department on traffic enforcement. So those are absolutely kind of issues that we can look at.
Yeah, and I also do
In the
want somebody
meantime.
to come out to my house and show me
Yes.
what exactly
Did you sign?
this means.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'm at 188 Broadway, right across Jenner Street. And that's where the cars end up.
So, I'm so sorry. Yeah, could you say that again?
Jenner Street,
Yep.
they're racing, trying to get over to Warwick.
Yep.
They end up in my yard.
Okay, thank you.
They really, too much traffic.
Yep, right here.
Sarah Martell, I'm at 31 Mayfair Street. Now you all know where I live, but so the challenge that we run into is I've got a lot of kids who are walking to school in the morning, going to school, heading down. I'm not here to talk about the easements, that's not gonna affect my home directly. What's gonna affect my house is I am on an extremely busy and dangerous corner at Claremont and Mayfair. The challenge that we run into now is everybody cuts up. They're still going up Claremont one way. I've seen it, I've stopped cars, I've spoken to the police department. The challenge that we're gonna run into, that's a huge concern for me and all my neighbors who have children, everybody's gonna be cutting up. It's just something to really keep in mind. I've spoken with the police department already, our neighbors spoken with the police department already. Everybody is still going up Claremont, up the one way, and everybody flies around the corner going up Mayfair to Canomo, and they try to go up Piedmont thinking that they're gonna cut through. So it is going to back up. It is a major concern. I will not let my kids play in the street, in the neighborhood. I live in a great neighborhood. It's just not, so it's just something to pay attention to when you guys are talking about. I actually believe he's paying attention, ma'am. I can speak for myself, thank you. So it's just something to pay attention to in the neighborhood. I'm sorry for all of the other stuff that's gonna happen with the properties, but my concern is our neighborhood. It's not gonna, I just wanna make sure that that's addressed as well.
Thank you. No, it's a great point. And part of the work that will happen with the new signals is a traffic count analysis to set up the timing so that the neighborhood is sort of benefiting from that.
Yeah, it's just that, I mean, we've spoken, multiple neighbors of ours have spoken to the police department. They've been great. You'll see cops every now and then that would sit at the top of the Claremont the one way. It's not stopping the flow of traffic that's flying down that street. And there's not even a light at Genesee yet. It's, people are going to cut up that street. It is going to make a huge impact on that neighborhood that's back there. So I know we're talking a lot about Broadway, but we just need to really pay attention to how it's going to impact. I've been there for 13 years. It's been a fairly quiet neighborhood with that traffic. It's gotten worse.
It's going to be bad during the construction.
Yeah, right back here, yep.
I live on Euclid Avenue, Patricia County, and Claremont enters, the flow from Claremont comes on to Euclid, and the countless accidents has not even been addressed. You're up on Mayfair, and that's a pain in the neck and a concern, of course, but there's countless accidents and or close calls constantly because Euclid Avenue is so busy, those people can't get out. Consequently, there are many accidents right there, and that's the overflow from this Jenner Street and Broadway. Thank you.
There's Wayne Johnson. I live on Penn Dexter Street. It's probably a moot point right now. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a traffic engineer. I've lived on Penn Dexter Street for 35 years. And I think everybody is missing the big picture here. The big picture is Jenner Street, Millard Ave, York Road, Cedar Road, Cedar Brook Road, they weren't made for the type of traffic that's being pushed through there. And I feel the reason that it's being pushed through there is because the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts changed Wyoming Square. So now you're forcing all these people to come around this way because they want to avoid that cluster down there in Wyoming Square, where you can't turn left. Right. You can't, you can just go straight through. So I think everybody's missing that. Those roads are not made for this traffic that's being pushed through there. Doing this is going to cause me a lot of problems because they're going to cut down Roanoke, which they do now. You're going to force more traffic down Roanoke to come down Penn Dexter Street. You go down there in the morning commute or the afternoon commute, it's a raceway. Yeah. It's a raceway. People coming down there, you can hear them starting down the end of the street and just flooring it, coming down. The same thing on Roanoke. And all you're going to do is cause more problems for that. You're just pushing the traffic to other areas. You're not fixing it. You're not fixing the problem. And again, I'm not an engineer. 35 years I watched how this traffic has gained all through that area.
I'm not going to touch on most of what you said because it has, it's outside of this project and it's not me. However, Penn Dexter Avenue, that is actually a road. There's definitely quite a bit of cut-through traffic on that right now. And actually, that's one where I actually think this project might help. Not that it's going to eliminate everybody, surely won't. You mentioned things that have changed. It's not just that. I think also now that people have their GPS and their phones kind of telling them the routes, it's a lot easier to find these alternative routes. Sometimes I'm just surprised on these routes that my phone takes me on when I'm driving around. few years ago, I rented an RV for a week. Boy, really surprised the route that took me on an RV. So Penn Dexter Street right now, so actually if you are coming down Jenna Street, there's a big long delay coming down Jenna Street. So I completely understand why people would cut through those neighborhood streets. We definitely even noticed in the traffic counts that there was actually quite a bit of traffic that was disappearing, right? The fact that there's going to be a traffic light, it is going to be a lot easier to stay on Jenna Street and to turn onto Broadway. So, not going to eliminate it, certainly, but you have more of a viable alternative.
Human nature, they're gonna avoid the light. That's human nature.
Yeah, but right now, they're at a stop where you have a long wait. So all I'm saying is that they won't have as much of a wait. It will be better. I don't guarantee it's going to eliminate anything, and I'm hoping it does. Similar, turning onto Jenna Street, you're actually at least going to have a left turn lane to turn into it. When I was trying to time the traffic signal, I was also making sure to keep some extra time for that left turn, because there is probably more of a demand that's actually even out there because they're pulling on a Penn Dexter right now. So that is a street that I think could have help. Some of the other streets that were mentioned, you know, this project really doesn't do anything for that. People are cutting through, and they're going to cut through in the future.
If I could, this gentleman said something about making one of the streets one way. Why not make Roanoke a one-way street going towards Jenna's? So traffic's not going to cut through there. You're not going to push it through there.
So one of the reasons that the signals go in is because there's a tremendous amount of analysis, traffic counts, all of that goes in. And by the way, the engineers do all of their thing, and then it's sent to Mass DOT, and their engineers review it both in Boston and in the district office. The purpose of really the signal at this point, given the volume and the accidents, number one, simplify the driving function. If I'm really meek, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to wait. Versus this gentleman right here may be very aggressive, he's going to pull right out. Sometimes that's what causes the accidents. By putting the signal there, right, it simplifies the intersection. It gives everybody their turn to go. And the way the signals are timed, and by the way, smart technology, the signals at Jenna Street, we're going to be talking to Euclid Ave.
They work better by themselves, actually.
But they're coordinated together. So as they're pulling out of Genesis, they're also timed at Euclid to make that intersection operate efficiently.
I understand everything you're trying to do. I do. I guess my biggest point is here, Mr. Mayor, can we make Roanoke Street a one-way street going towards Jenna's? That'll alleviate a lot of this traffic that's cutting through. Force the people to stay on to Jenna's and to go through that light that's going to be timed. So,
Yeah, wait, I mean, you know that I can't stand here and say I'm going to declare a road one way. But I would be...
Look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, be happy to look at it. There is no project in this city where I'm going to say, this is not my responsibility. We are doing what we can to deal with increased traffic in the city. We know there's more cars. You come home after school, after work, and look at your street, there's a lot of cars in this city. And the only way to move forward, instead of just dealing with what we have, is to make these kinds of improvements. And that's where that's what the goal of this is. All this analysis, all these engineers, is to try to figure out how to do a project that's going to address the impact of this increased traffic. It's not going to solve everyone's issue, and we will continue to be open to other suggestions, other projects, other ways of improving everyone's ability to get around in the city safely. Yeah, back there in that corner.
Yeah, Joanne Lindner, 302 Linwood Street. So will the Linfield project still be going on next year when you start the Broadway project? Can anybody answer that? Do you really think that's a smart idea to have both ends of Wyoming Square under construction at the same time?
Just to add to that, you're also constructing a new picker. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
So does the city have like a traffic plan for all of this? And then
I guess I'll be going to Saugus. I live.
It aligns with Wayne's concerns about all these cut-through streets behind. Because you talk about safety, but these are neighborhoods full of children. Children who like to play in the streets, and these cars are flying through them.
To address your concern about overlapping projects, Most likely, yes, right? Our project is scheduled to be advertised next year. There's a project that's currently under construction, that's a multi-year project. What we can do as design engineer, both projects have Mass DOT involvement, correct? Right, so both projects have Mass DOT involvement. Design engineer, City of Lynn, there's a lot of common denominators on a project, on those two projects. We can work with that other project through Mass DOT, through the City of Lynn, and we can coordinate, right? We're doing that right now on a similar corridor in Watertown, where there's 3 projects right in a row of each other. So you have to worry about simple things like construction signage. You don't want road work ahead, and then road work ahead, and then road work ahead. Like, obvious things like that.
Well, it sounds like that's happening.
Well,
There's 2 major projects, one going this way, one going that way. So coming out of, say, Parkland Ave, my choice is to go down towards, like, Union Street or whatever, or go up Parkland Ave the other way and give all my business to the town of Saugus. I mean, there's a lot of traffic right now that hasn't been addressed.
Saugus High 2005 graduate.
Why can't you wait?
So yes, we do have, there are overlapping projects. We do coordinate through the city, through Mass DOT on construction, scheduling, detours, traffic management. At the end of the day, all traffic management plans have to be approved by the city. And we do our best to make sure that traffic through these temporary disturbances for construction are handled the best that they can be, utilizing local knowledge from the city. A few years, 2-3 years.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a good point. We need to make sure that the work is being coordinated. There's obviously what's happening on Linfield Street. There's what's happening on this project here in Broadway. We're building the new Pickering Middle School over the next few years. And that's part of the reason why we need to improve traffic in this area, is because of the travel that's going to be happening for that new Pickering. And, you know, there's going to be interruption. We're going to be dealing with the effects of the construction. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that you're not going to notice it. But the goal is that the result will make all our lives better, that our residents will be safer, and that we're addressing some of these problems that you all live with every day and that have identified. Yeah, Sally.
Sal Bigliaccio, 181 Broadway. I first want to apologize for my slight outburst when Mr. Benevento mentioned about eminent domain. And thank you to the gentleman from the DOT that did correct him in that this project does include eminent domain, and I am going to be one of the potential recipients of that action, no matter how you may want to change the words. So I guess the first question I have is that this is an essential part of the public process, is what's going on here. The problem is you're 3 years late. That's the problem here. Okay? I've said it over and over and over again. There are many good things about this project, but there are many things that many of us can't support. And if we work together at this over the period of time, we wouldn't be here tonight. Okay, we'd be working together as a community. And certainly, our state delegation, they're bringing home the bacon. Okay? They just gave it to the wrong cook. And I don't want to eat it. And that's just how it goes. So a couple of questions I have is this project 100% complete? Who would answer that question?
So it's at 100% design, but as you remember, we've been making changes to the project, right? So we had an issue that we identified, we spoke about, right? A couple times, and we recognized that there was going to be a negative impact with the bus stop that was in front of the small business. And this was just a couple weeks ago, working with the state delegation and the MBTA and MassDOT, we changed the project. I'm just saying, you know that, I heard what you said about being 3 years late. We can't go back in time. We're here to work as a community to find, get to a project that's going to improve this neighborhood.
agree with you. You weren't the mayor 3 years ago, okay? And whatever this project, there was one neighborhood meeting on this in 2018, right? And I'm not blaming anybody, okay? But we got talking about meetings on Linfield Street, right? There were meetings. Okay, there was input, there was community input. Not nothing for 5 years and 11. And that's unfair. But that is how it is nonetheless, and this is where we are. So, and as far as the design changes, besides, thank you for moving the bus stop, but design changes as far as anything. I mean, this is the 100% completed design that we're looking at. So when we're talking about changing anything, it's not the lights, it's not the poles, it's not the whatever it is.
Yeah, no, it's 100% design, but I just gave you an example of something we changed. Yeah. So if there's a change that we identify in this process, then we'll fight for it. I mean, we want to make this as successful as possible, and so that it's never too late for the right idea. So if there's something that you have on your mind that you're sort of want to suggest, okay.
Can this project be done without taking my land by eminent domain?
So, I mean, we've asked that question, and we've been told that there's no way to do the intersection without, and the taking, you remember, the permanent easement is the rounding of that corner, the 17 square feet. I wish there was a way that we could say that was going to happen regardless.
I just want to point out some things. That's all I'm saying. I appreciate, we've developed a nice relationship over the last 2 weeks. I appreciate that. I appreciate you working with me. Okay, I appreciate you concerned about my wife, and my family, and my property, and my business. I understand that, Mr. Lee. So this isn't between me and you. You know what I mean? I'm just looking to, you know, you've got a great chief of staff. He's doing a wonderful job for you. He's communicating. That triangle, right? You know, you say it's 17 square feet. You know, it really doesn't sound a lot, right? Except, I didn't know how to do the square foot of a triangle, right? So I Googled. And to get a square foot of a triangle, right, it's and if you know the three dimensions, right, it's 1/2 times A, B, and C, right? And that is it. But the A, B, and C that I'm concerned about isn't the 17 square feet. Actually, it's the 8 feet, the 9 feet, and the 8 feet. So you're taking 8 feet of my corner property and 9 feet going across. That's about 23 square feet, but that's neither here nor there. So it's like lopping off the tip of my nose. I can still breathe. No one may notice it, but I'll notice it. And I know Mr. Benevento makes, you know, he likes to make jokes about the shrub. You know, it's just a shrub. But we've been maintaining that front yard and that shrub for 40 years. And that means something to us. You know what I mean? Look at all this. You know, oh, it's just a fountain and all that. Hey, it's just a fountain. Okay. Maybe for you it is. For me it's something else. For the community it's something else maybe. I don't know. You know, it's my front yard. It's my home. My business is where we live. And there's just, you know, and I get it, the traffic. I get what you're saying about the crashes, right? But when you throw up that statistic of the crashes, right? Okay, it's one, because those 25 crashes are between two intersections. So, okay, it's one crash a month. And, you know, one, I guess, is too many. 1 month is too many. I don't disagree. But I can guarantee you one thing. There would have been 3 times as many crashes on that corner if 40 years ago we didn't decide to do what we wanted to do at that corner. Because there were hedges all around that corner, 6 feet tall. You couldn't go around that intersection, okay, without seeing it. And me and my father, we decided we're tearing it down, we're gonna put up a fence, because that's what's better for the community. Okay? So we've always done what we felt we can do for the safety of that neighborhood. And we appreciate our neighborhood, and it's just that it's, you know, the 8 feet around the entire perimeter of my home, business, and property, from Jenner Street to the corner, all the way to Miller Place, giving that out as a temporary easement, or whatever you want to call it. You're going to take down my fence. I've got sprinklers there. I've got lighting underneath. Okay? I've got things there. And, you know, I mean, it's out of my home. You know, it's not a thing. This is a public works project. You know, it's a little emotional, but it's a different thing for us. So, thank you.
So I appreciate you sharing that, Salvi, and I appreciate what you said about you know, establishing a relationship. I have appreciate the opportunity to start to get to work with you and think this through. And I really do. A lot of what you mentioned are things that we can address. You know, I've never not taken seriously your concerns about your property and your shrub and your fountain, because I do think that's valuable, and I am grateful for the role that you play in this community, particularly in the neighborhood. I was thrilled that we were able to figure out the spaces thing so that the fountain isn't threatened. And you know, for the corner there on the 17 square feet, I'm very positive that the consultants and MassDOT can work with design to help figure out the fence and the lighting and all that, and try to find a way to get that property to look the way you want it, given the permanent easement.
We spoke I think a few months back on the phone about your property, what we're doing on your property. You know, like I said, that pizza slice, that corner of your property is really vital to how people can cross that intersection, that corner of the intersection. Because if we don't have a compliant crossing there, we need a level space for someone to turn on. If someone is in a wheelchair and they need to have a level space to turn on, if we don't have that space, there's no level spot, because we have 2 ramps right there, because we need to cross both the side street and Broadway. And with respect to your property, as I mentioned earlier, we have certain requirements that we need to fulfill as far as, okay, if we're doing 2 feet of loam and grass seed along your fence line, we need to be able to go there and put grass seed down, right? So we're not looking to touch the fountain or disturb any lighting you may have. We're simply looking, the majority of this is access, and that's all we're looking for.
Can I engage, or do I have to listen? Okay. Are you going to take down my fence?
I do have to look at the plan. We can go look at the plan after this, but like I said, the majority is if we're taking out that sidewalk panel and we put it back, we want to make sure that we have the ability to put grass and loam and seed back, and we want to make your property look just like it is today, right? With brand new sidewalks and frontage along your property.
Yeah, sorry, can I just answer the question? But let me just answer the question you just asked. Because the answer is, if the fence came down, they would put it back up, either how you want it or better. You know, that a little bit of the fence crosses the property line to the city property line, so that we have to address that. But if it needed to come down as part of the construction, it would go back in the same or better form.
If, let's say, for example, for example, if we're having this discussion now, and this is a planning process for this project. And you've got this project set up right now, and I would be as adamant now or 3 years ago. Let's say, if I say, listen, we're going to, is this the only project? Is this the only solution to what it is you're trying to create? You know what I mean? If we were talking about this 7 foot or 8 foot triangle, right? So this, that is just a cut. Is there, would you have come up with modifications to satisfy that?
Yes, so we looked at that corner, and that corner, the way that, so a few things, right, is the angles of the streets coming together, right, how, you know, the width of the streets, and the ability for vehicles to turn. If we were to pull that corner out, get the sidewalk out of that easement area, we potentially have detrimental effects to vehicles turning in that intersection on the side street. Then you have trash trucks or larger vehicles jumping the curb because they don't have the ability to clearly drive in the travelway because we pushed that sidewalk and that curbing out. We've looked at that, and you know we've gone through the process of looking at that, not just your corner, but all of the side streets, right? It's a balance between pedestrian safety, bicycle accommodations, but also vehicles as well. So that's what we're looking to do.
Jenna Street is too narrow to put bike lane.
There won't be any bike lanes on Jenna.
Yeah, there's no bike lane. So this is the corner, just so that everybody knows what we're talking about. I really appreciate the questions, and I, you know, like we said, someone can come out and talk to you. You know that we are happy to continue to work with you. I think we've established a great dialogue, and we'll continue that. Do other folks have questions? Yep.
Joyce Davis, I'm at 198 diagonal from Sally, front from Connor. I invite any of you to come and sit in my kitchen and watch cars come out of Jenna Street, coming up Broadway, going left on Jenna Street, then coming over Crutton, and then the guys coming around like this, and there's 25 accidents. There's probably 50 that didn't get reported. I don't understand why we need bike paths. It just blows my mind. You talk about safety, and you're going to go around one for this and for bike paths. From there. Why? Who knows the bike paths? The only bike I see it. Yeah. I'm going down Broadway with cars going 100 miles an hour, or whatever they all do wheelers. But I'm just saying, you talk about safety and bike paths, just not good. It's not good.
So as you know, we've mentioned multiple times here tonight about projects, funding requirements, project funding, stakeholders involved, right? All of these projects now that are designed through City of Lynn, through Mass DOT, we have a complete streets policy initiative that we have to adhere to. So these designs are not only to cater to vehicles, but it's also, you have to look at vehicles, pedestrians, transit riders, bicyclists on this corridor. So it's a very stringent process where we need to provide bicycle accommodations to be eligible for federal funding. So this is part of the process, right? We have bicycle lanes where we can fit them. And there are some projects where, you know, we have the side streets here with the shared accommodation. But for federal funding projects, we have to abide by complete streets policies, including the implementation of bicycle facilities on these projects.
Now they're going to get killed instead of
So Jose Ponce, 23 Jenna Street. I see a lot of negativity on bike lanes. You know, I've been cycling through Jenna Street in this area here for a while, and it's extremely dangerous for cyclists. And it's just, you know, there's many of us cyclists who use that area, and there'll be a lot more for these improvements that come in. So, you know, I'm really appreciative of all the work. I didn't think it was going to get done so soon. But this is extremely important because the more cyclists you have, the less cars you're going to have, and the less traffic you're going to have. So this is just, you know, be patient. There will be hopefully less cars. Because the real simple solution is there's too many cars. Why don't you just bicycle?
Yeah, yes.
We're a key.
Okay, yeah. Then I picked the right one.
No, you haven't.
We're on blanks on Main Street. Where exactly are the bike lanes going to be? Are they going to be on both sides, on one side of the road? Where are they going to start? Where are they going to end? Are they going to go right through the square?
No, so basically the project doesn't go through the square, so this doesn't. So the bike lanes would be on-road bike lanes, one in each direction along Broadway. So we don't have anything in Euclid, don't have anything in Giants.
That makes no parking.
So in some areas that affected parking, actually the turn lane going into Genesis probably had a bigger impact on parking, but no, there definitely is some impact to parking in some areas.
It makes the road narrow.
So it actually is, the vehicle lane is still 11 feet wide. So you still have plenty of room as a driver. 11 feet is what it should be for driving. The 12 feet is if you're on a highway. And that's the way it used to be. 12 feet kind of encourages you. Right now it's really wide out there. It's kind of a no man's land. So it's going to be a very consistent 11 feet lane for the motor vehicles. We want the vehicles to not be hugging right along the sidewalk. We kind of, we can kind of spend all night debating bike lanes and, policies and whatever. But bike lanes have a number of advantages. Both the bicyclists, it also gives that extra distance between the drivers, the moving vehicles, and the sidewalk. So there's definitely there's a number of benefits if you get those vehicles a little further away from the pedestrians. There's a number of benefits of them. But again, we could be talking all night about policies and whatever. But in short, they are required. So they are not going anywhere on Broadway. We talked about what can change. The bike lanes cannot change. Oh, before I give up the mic, one thing I just want to mention, because it's in my head. As this project progresses, this is not done. There is no contractor yet, but when there is a contractor, there will be a meeting kind of early on in the process. So for any abutters that have concerns about, irrigation, whatever, that's going to be where the contractor is actually doing the work in front of your house. It'd be a great time to kind of talk to them, coordinate, let them know. If you have stuff underneath there, that's great because, again, they're the ones that's actually digging out there. So this project's not over.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to address some of the comments. We tend to get vilified a bit at MassDOT because we require things. We do require bike lanes as part of our Healthy Transportation Policy Directive, but and when we can make them work, we make them work. We are a multimodal agency on the move at MassDOT and very much have embraced a future that is more healthy for communities, less impactful on our climate, and more sustainable for generations to come. And that includes building out painfully project by project, mile by mile of safe, accessible, connected, multimodal network that is fit for all ages and all abilities. So not just the cyclist, like some folks who you sort of think of, cyclists like me occasionally on a number of the many trails we built up. But here in Lynn, another one of the major initiatives we've been focused on with the city for many years. Shout out to Aaron Clausen, your principal planner here. Yeah, let's give Aaron some love. His colleague Lauren, who I don't think is here tonight. This administration has been incredibly supportive, along with our state delegation, in giving MassDOT the resources to build out, and with our partners at Environmental Affairs and through Gateway Cities program, one of the most world-class trail networks in all of New England, if not maybe the entire country. The Northern Strand Community Trail has been one of the most, getting chills thinking about it, I'm so corny about it, but really one of the most significant investments that I've seen. I grew up here on the North Shore, and that I've seen since in my adulthood. I used to spend time going to Nahant Beach, and I live in East Boston now, and with the completion of the Northern Strand other planned improvements from here back to my neighborhood, folks can bike that entire distance if they're so able-bodied or willing. That's a generational investment with a lot of things piecing together. This stretch of Broadway, whether it's, folks can see that today or not, is part of a larger vision for the City of Lynn that makes it, like I said, healthier, sustainable, and more friendly for every member of the community here, whether they're here in this room or out working or taking care of their families tonight. A couple of years back, we published a major policy initiative called the Safer Streets Where People Playbook. This was a work that Aaron and I partnered on, mostly with me looking at the crash map, starting with this project actually, and saying, all right, we're about to introduce the same way that major development, say like, I don't know, something on a river that used to be run by a major aeronautics company, the way that those kinds of major places to create trips and traffic and the way that people talk about development sites, the Northern Strand is doing that for people. Not just cars, but for people walking and biking and rolling and spending time with their families and enjoying the outdoors. But it's going to do so in a way that it's going to draw people through streets that are notoriously high crash and dangerous. And while Broadway may feel far flung from downtown for maybe some of you, and that it seems like a disconnected leg of that network, this is what it's all about, and this is why MassDOT has these requirements, so that every investment we make, these are not overnight investments. This project has been fast-tracked at 5 years. This is very speedy for us. So you think about it in those terms, in that timeline, we're talking about generational investments that are going to change things for our children and our grandchildren. And it may seem a little silly when we have just a little stretch of bike lane here and a stretch of bike lane there, but it's those stretches, especially where you have high crash locations, which make those people walking and cycling the most vulnerable in the network. And they don't have a big, large steel box around them to protect them. They're relying on everybody else using the road to share it and to keep it safe. So, we're continuing to try and make the City of Lynn a safer place for everyone, and I think this project is a major leap in doing that, at least on Broadway.
Yeah, right here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So I live in the 281 Broadway. I think so it's a butter. I learned this new word for me. I am a butter person now. So, and I live in a house that has more than 173 years old. So I live since 2016 here. I moved to Lynn because, the very reason. But so I'm just wondering. So I love the idea of the improvements, to have everything done for the better of the city. I have around kids, my family, myself, but I'm wondering how this construction, whatever you are going to do, is going to affect the structure, all the structure of my house. Who is going to help me to figure it out about that? So it's a very old, and also it's at the corner and the lake above the pond. So it's very close to the pond. It's a very vulnerable location, I think. So would you help me to handle this? I don't want to use to oppose the project, but so it's going to affect my house.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. We have a sign-up list in the back. We could have somebody, one of the engineers come out and speak with you at your property to look specifically at whatever your concern is. So absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're in the back here, maybe right here for one, yeah.
Richard Guerin, 172 Broadway. I'm from Swampscott, so I'm a transplant to Lynn. But before Lynn, we lived in New York for 8 years. And so, Lynn was always this kind of not quite as nice as Swampscott. I'm sorry, everybody. Maybe that was the perception. I've come around. All you have to do is live in New York for 8 years, and then you come and you go, hey, Lynn is pretty nice. I'm not one of these, not in my backyard, anti-progress, anything like that. My first concern was, I don't understand the process by which this got initiated. We got a certified letter in the mail. That was number one. We talked to the neighbors. Thanks for Salvi to sort of bring everybody together. But there were a lot of simple concerns, like just the procedurally simple concerns, like some of our neighbors are English not their first language. They're getting letters in the mail saying, check this box if you want to donate your property, things like that. In my job, for example, I'm not trying to throw stones here, but like whenever I go to a meeting and I'm the only, it's all middle-aged white guys like me, that's a problem. And we live in Lynn, part of the great sort of assets, diversity of Lynn. I love it. Coming from Lily White Swampscott, I love it. And then you come here to a place like this tonight, and first thing I walk in, I see nothing but white guys in the front. It's that kind of thing. It just sort of reeks of this cover of night. Why does it have to happen this way? So that was my number one question. My number two question was, why was there just, we came in late, apologies if you already covered this, but why was it like maybe one city meeting to discuss what's happening here? Because we live at 172. I've had 4 cars in 10 years, and 2 of them were smashed. 2 doors down, our neighbor, Mr. Jimmy, 5 cars sacrificed to the gods of Lynn. Is he here?
He's right here.
Oh, here he is. 7 cars smashed between us. So we're totally, I mean, all you have to do is look at the fence of the cemetery across the street, and the insurance replaces sections. It looks like bumper cars, all the new sections of all the accidents. We totally want it to be improved, right? The only nice sideway panels in our neighborhood said WPA on them. They're 100 years old. It's been nothing but Band-Aids and everything. So I welcome an opportunity where new investments come into Lynn. I really do. And then there was this stuff of like, maybe it was overreacting that because the easement was 8 feet of our front yard. We're going to lose 8 feet of our front yard. So that was a concern. Then I have things like every time I see a big public works project, it's like they'd finish it, like Highland Ave, and then there's a new subdivision, they dig up Highland Ave. It was a once in a generation thing. Bicycles, I love bicycles. I voted for you because your opponent thought the biggest problem facing Lynn was bike paths. I love them, but on this plan, the bike path basically ends in front of our house. So I mean, I love the bicyclist guy up front. I love him. Great. I want more bicyclists, but like 63 feet of bike lane, and then it ends when you get off your bike. What do you just? You don't go all the way to Peabody? I mean, and maybe it's part of a 100-year vision to get a half-a-mile bike lane to Peabody. Well, and also getting rid of the bus stop on this side too, as well. The cars, I'll tell you, I'm just telling you, nobody asked us for feedback. Like people cutting from Jenna Street over to Warwick, crossing Broadway. That's a huge problem where it's traffic. We're right on Broadway. About 3 hours a day, it's just traffic all the way back to Peabody, right? So we're inhaling that. So of course it will come bike lanes. But the things that snarl it up, and I know there's an intersection going in there, that's great. We had Andrew Hall out to the house to help to talk us through the project. Sacrificing parking to me in front of the house is no big deal. And again, I don't mean to myopically see it through our situation alone. But the reason why I parked cars there was to protect our house. It was a cushion so our house wouldn't get hit by the cars. The last car that hit us came straight up from Miller Place, that dead end, up our driveway, 90 degrees.
Totaled both of our cars.
Totaled both of our cars. So anyway, so I have these fears about having to dig up the sewer patch line to the house, because as soon as we finish this nice project, we're going to dig it up, because that's just the way New England is. But I just don't understand. They're like Miller Place, that dead end right at the other end of Salvy's thing. The feedback from the community is, so you're proposing a curb, bike lane, the road, right? The people who all day turn down that dead end, including Salvy's customers, a lot of people just turn around right there. They're lunatic drivers. They will go into the bike lane. It's not going to be helpful because it's not sealed. I mean, it's not protected in any way. So I guess I'm just wondering, not to mention all the cut-through traffic. It says not a throughway. Warwick is not a do not enter. There's not going to be no turns on whatever, and no turns down Miller Place. There just seemed to me, I had concerns about this process, but also, and I'm not against anything. I want Lynn to have investment. I want Lynn to do well. Raise my taxes. I'm one of those lunatics. Raise my taxes. I don't care. I want it to be better. But when I asked Andrew Hall about whether this was going to improve traffic, he said no. None of this is going to help traffic. And then secondly, our concern about protecting our house, sacrificing our cars, he said, well, the curb's going to be slightly higher, maybe that, I mean, I guess we just, if we're lucky. So I'm just wondering why there wasn't, number one, the process, but number two, why wasn't there more engagement with the community, unless it's for fear. And I apologize if I'm not a public servant. I appreciate you guys, I do. but maybe it's fear that if you open up a real forum about the people who live there, then it just gets sunk. And anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you. No, so we covered this a little bit in the beginning, but there is no fear to having an open conversation. That's why we're here tonight. There was a public meeting in 2018. There's another one in 2021. I mean, I'm not going to say that there's not a need to improve the communication. We're happy to try to work on that. Language access is a great point. I appreciate you raising that. That's certainly been a priority for us. We've hired interpreters at City Hall speaking some of the major languages.
But the letters that went out were only in English.
Yeah, so, sorry, you said
The
something
letters
else?
that went out were only in English.
Yeah, no, I'm saying this is something we need to approve.
Yeah.
We're trying to work on getting a QR code on a lot of our communications that will say in multiple languages, like if you need translation, here's the link to go to or the number to call. We're a multilingual city and there's a lot of improvements that need to happen to the systems in order to be able to get there. So absolutely want to continue to improve on that. We're open to improvements for the process, and I appreciate you raising that.
Yep. Quick question. Is there going to be a website for questions and answers and visibility during the project, so you can see what people are worried about?
Yeah, we can do that.
Like a blog or a Facebook page or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's a great point. Yep.
I live on Claremont Street, and I'm one of those people that has to come down and have some just know, say,
Alan, what would be part of the intersection now?
It is part of the intersection.
You want to talk about the phasing?
But I think in general, we've got a lot of comments about making more work one way or making changes. That's not part of this project. Doesn't preclude the city from doing something afterwards. Of course, if we kind of threw it in you definitely need to make sure that everybody's on board when changing the roads to one way, because obviously everybody has to follow it, including the residents. So that is not part of this project. Again, it might be later. I don't know, some people have, so I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
Alan, talk about the phasing, if you're at Jenner Street or if you're at Warwick.
Yeah, so you will get...
Right.
Yeah. So if you're coming down Jenner Street, you're going to come, wait for the light, you're going to get a green light, you're going to be able to go wherever you want. Not into a house, though.
You'll be able to go straight across, or you can make a right or a left.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're taking a right or left and not going kind of straight across, but they will have a green light at the...
So when, just to clarify, at Genesis, going across our neighborhood,
Yep.
you cannot go straight across. You either take a left or a right, or you take a right and a quick left. So that's the question. So
That is part of the signal.
Yeah.
We're trying to explain. So when you come out of Genesis, you want to go to Warwick, you'd make a right and a quick left. Everybody on Broadway is stopped. They can't move.
So they're going to be stopped on the, if I'm looking at Warwick,
Right.
they're going to be stopped
They're
on the
already
right.
Is there going to be a
They're
do
going
not
to be
enter?
stopped on the right-hand side of Warwick, so they're not going to be walking Warwick.
Correct. You'll be able to go across. And then say when Warwick goes, they're going to kind of be able to get across to Jenner Street. It's not going to be the chaotic, I don't even know what to call it, what you do right now. So now coming eastbound on Broadway, they are going to have a left turn lane to Jenner Street, and then it's going to be a through lane if you're going through, just continue on Broadway. So right now, people kind of make it that way, and then people kind of go around. It's also going to have, it's going to be protected permissive, so the light is going to, you're first going to get a green arrow and get a chance to go, and then later on you'll have a flashing yellow light to Jenner Street. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a diagram there with the traffic patterns.
One other question, how does that travel another set of lights?
cul-de-sac, all that traffic. That says no. You can always like, is there any way is it gonna end up?
I don't think it'll be any worse than it is now. I don't think that part's going to be any better either.
Well, everybody, when they sit in the traffic,
Yeah, but you really, well, I guess, are you worried about people taking a left right here?
Yes, yes.
We did the label last night.
Yep, that's my street. And that's where we were like parking in front of my house every day. This is where cutting up the street. That's one of the, and that's
I mean, both Broadway is already kind of really jammed up a lot in Euclid. That approach, I mean, Jenna Street's going to be operating pretty well. The intersection, I mean, the big thing is, yeah, right now, all of the delay is on Jenna Street. And then you got all the delay on Broadway by Euclid. So we're kind of putting the signals, you're kind of sharing it a little bit.
The key here is that the traffic is going to be organized. Right now, right. That's right now.
Oh, I completely understand why.
All right, yeah, ready?
Hey everyone, I'm Paul Erickson. I live at 180 Broadway. I'm directly across from the greenhouse. My question is, and it was mentioned, so I don't happen to park in front of my house, but I do have the luxury to pull up in front and then back into my driveway because I like to pull out into the speedway. And I'm lucky, I have a really big driveway. My wife and I, we have 3 vehicles, fine. Almost all of my neighbors park in front of their house. So parking, yes, is an issue. I heard and appreciate, sacrificing parking for bike lane and buffer lane. My question a little bit more is 5-foot bike lane, 2-foot buffer. Amazon, FedEx, garbage trucks, are they stuck in the 11-foot travel lane? One, I am concerned about, I have the luxury when we have guests, they just park right in front of our house. Does that go away? It sounds like it does go away, but I am curious about Amazon, food deliveries, everyone. Do they just hold up traffic in that travel lane?
Amazon will never do whatever we told them to anyway. They're going to make the most convenient. Amazon was most likely to be blocking the bike lane, but they're usually there in and out pretty quick, and I'd like to.
So with that, the buffer lane, is that set up with posts or? Oh, no. Okay. Okay.
But as far as, visitors.
Yeah, so that'll be open 7 feet.
Yeah, right here.
My name's Charlie Cole. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I live at the end of Warwick Street, Claremont Street, so if you blow the stop sign from Warwick to Claremont, which people do, and they end up on my front lawn and wreck my Christmas decorations a couple times. So we kind of have that little bit of a hazard. And I know we have to give up something to get something, so it's more of a request. And then we have people coming up Claremont. I've seen people get out of their car and argue with you after they've almost run you and your children over, and I'm getting ready, am I going to have to go out and defend this lady? I don't know whether it's the DPW or whoever down the bottom of Claremont Street. I don't know whether it's the DPW, they put cones and barrels and do not enter, so we really appreciate that. We have people flying down the road, and I frequently see the Lynn Police Department, so they are down there. So they're both trying very hard to make our neighborhood safer. So we have those kind of 3, and I have 2 twin teenage drivers who are trying to get out of that driveway, and the traffic's coming from both directions. So there's the stop sign, there's people flying up a one-way, and so my concern is if there is more traffic and they come down around, like we're heading into this area where we're going to have a lot of head-on collisions, and I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think that means for us? I know you don't have a crystal ball, I don't, but then with those conditions, what are your thoughts?
In general, I think it sounds like that there's, both during construction and then afterwards, I think that it's definitely something the city, maybe it's not part of this project, but it's awfully, it butts up to this project. I think turn restrictions, one-way restrictions, I think could be on the table as a neighborhood type project, not to kind of throw another project at you. But I definitely don't think that that discussion is ending tonight. I think that that's definitely something moving forward.
The city and the Lynn Police Department are clearly making efforts. I go out and talk to the guys and say, hey, thank you very much for being here. So they're there. So I wanted to acknowledge that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this project, especially when you get a MassDOT project, that red line there, that's what we can kind of work on as part of this project. The kind of things outside of it are a separate project.
But these are conditions that are within this project.
Yes. So one thing, so one thing to consider too with this, there's been discussions about one-ways and restricting this and restricting that. You can't, and I heard someone tonight say, well, can't we just put a one-way sign up?
Well, we have it. They go up.
But I'm just talking about if there was something else to be done. You need to study that, because if you don't, all you're doing is really kicking the can down the road. We fixed your problem, but we made it worse for him, right? So that stuff, like if you're gonna be doing like one-ways and all of this other kind of stuff, you really need to study the traffic patterns, you need to study the volumes, you need to study how people are coming and going, both in the morning, which is different than in the afternoon, all that kind of stuff that you have to look at, as opposed to, well, we're just gonna put a one-way up and we'll see what happens. And you don't want to do that, because like I said, what might help you is going to affect somebody else in an
What I don't want is my teenage daughter that's been in 5 fender benders and it's getting costly. Like, it's dangerous, So.
No, we will absolutely look at that. I appreciate you raising that. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Frank Blank. I live on Janet Street. Been there since 1977. I'm for the project, but Salvi can't get rid of it, all right? I'm not even a friend of his. I do business with him. We could trip over each other and stop and shop and wouldn't know each other, all right? So there's nothing. He can't get rid of it. My biggest issue is, somebody made a comment that the intersection of Genesis Broadway was going to be enlarged, so larger vehicles could transfer onto Genesis. To begin with, there should be no larger vehicles going on Genesis besides the trash truck and fire. Because there's a sign right on that post that says no trucks.
They don't enforce it.
That they don't enforce. You can come by at 8 o'clock in the morning and I'll bet you'll see a concrete truck, you'll see a cherry pickup, you'll see about 15 bucket trucks. Well, I'd love to know where they park in the city of Lynn. So you can't park those in your house, all right? And what provisions are going to be made to get the trucks off of Genesis Street that are never supposed to have been there to begin with, back onto Linfield, which I do know about construction just a little bit, been in the business for over 50 years. So I know that's a long way away. But what do we do? This is half the traffic problem, is these huge trucks coming down the street, both ways, depending on the time of day. And it's speeding. The sign's been put up recently that says 25 miles an hour. But when people transfer to the city, I'm not even saying city residents, they don't know how to read signs. You can put a bike lane down, I'm happy for it. We ride bikes. But if you don't put teeth into that bike lane with a cop there with his ticket tag, it's not going to do any good. The same way I've been asking people jokingly, the big white squares that are by Richdale, by Walgreens, there's a few more. They don't even know what they mean. You're not supposed to drive into those until the intersection of the street. But there's no cops there. I understand the cops short-handed, so I'm not cop bashing, but you need some teeth into the traffic problems that we have done. the rate allocated. Get the guy, I don't know, plain clothes with a ticket for it. I mean, I don't know. So I would like the question on the
Sure. So when I talked earlier about turning vehicles, right, we want to make sure that the corner of that intersection can handle a certain vehicle, right? We want to make sure, we have our friends from fire and police here, right? If I design a corner of an intersection, I have to be sure that their apparatus can get down that side street, right? So I have to be sure that, you know, your trash truck, if you have trash services, can get down that side street, right? So yes, we do have design vehicles that we need to accommodate, and that's a must, right? We can't handicap one emergency responders to tighten up that. So we're not making the intersection bigger. We just have to make sure that it can accommodate certain vehicles.
Will there be a sign hung up over this big arm that goes out on the traffic light that says no trucks?
No,
with an arrow?
we're not proposing any sort of truck exclusions.
Well, the point is, that road is trucks excluded. We have the sign, it's been there before 1977, before I moved it. And I'm the guy that had it updated of 1978, because it was very basic when I first moved in, when I was a young newlywed, all right? So that street is supposed to be excluded from truck traffic. For a while, we have the mayor here and the police chief, or whoever it is. I'm not backing anybody, but we want to throw that in the rug, because it falls on deaf ears anyplace else.
And so for the second part of your question about using that street as for trucks, you know, the idea is that if we can make Broadway more efficient to move traffic through with signals and mitigating queues, with having green time for straight through traffic, that we want to keep those trucks on the larger streets that can handle the larger vehicles. But you know, also I do want to reemphasize that we want to make the intersection safe and also traversable for fire apparatus, emergency response, and also your trash trucks are bigger. Hopefully no one here from trash company. Biggest culprits for running over the corners of new sidewalks. So thank you.
No, yeah, and I appreciate the feedback about the no trucks, and you know, hopefully part of the advantages of having conversations like this is we get more detailed feedback, and you know, see as part of the ongoing conversation, there's going to be more conversations about this particular project and these particular intersections, and so that's good feedback. Thank you. Yep, in back.
Hi, I'm Lisa Crossman, President of Concerned Citizens. I have a couple of questions. One, I realize we're trying to deal with traffic and safety, which is with the accidents, traffic lights, crosswalks, and on these side streets that everyone cuts down. Salvi and I have been here longer than most of you guys have been on, and we've all learned these side streets. Why aren't you putting speed bumps in there to at least slow them down on these side streets with the kids? It's a simple solution. Everyone looks for complicated solutions when what we need is proper traffic lights, sidewalks, and some speed bumps. Not a 20-year project that costs $100 million. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
So turning off of Warwick?
When they come off Warwick, you said they're having a light on Young Street in Warwick. Are they having a no turn on red? Because we live, our driveway is right in this section, right where you put in all the lights. So we're going to have trouble getting in and out of our driveway. We already have tons of trouble now. Our cars have been hit, like, I can't tell you how many cars we've gone through, even just trying to get in our driveway. People go around on each side of the car, we've been hit. And now you're putting in front of, we can't park in front of a house because you're taking it the bike lane and the crossing, you're putting a crossing walk and the light right at our house, right in front where we park. We use that parking every day, and now you're taking it away.
I can't remember, actually I have the plan over there, so I could probably look at that afterwards. And that's something that we could potentially, especially on Warwick, that would really be a big impact.
Well, they come flying off Warwick.
Well, I mean,
too.
exactly, it's not
Right
gonna be-
around. We don't even get out of our driveway or in front of our house, and all of a sudden somebody's at us, and it's like, where did they come from? Because we were just looking down the street, and they weren't there. They come flying right off.
I park in front of the house.
Yeah. Mentioned you've got 4 cars, right?
The traffic is so heavy, I can't back into the driveway.
Yeah.
I will not pull into my driveway, because that makes me liable when I'm backing up. So I have to back in, I park in front of my house until the traffic dies down, so I can back into my yard. And now I can't.
Yeah, I'll take a look at this. That might be something that we could check. I mean, stuff like that is definitely something.
That's great. Thank you for raising that. And did you sign? We have your. Okay. Perfect. Good. Yeah. What was it? Yeah. Sí, está bien.
Yo vivo en la 327 Yucle Avenue. Mi pregunta es, yo tengo como la parte del frente, pero es muy pequeña. Entonces, ¿qué piensan hacer en esa parte donde yo vivo? ¿Qué es lo que tratan de extender más la calle? Sí, enfrente, ajá.
Sí, pues, sí, tenemos una lista, vamos a hablar después y podemos tomar su información y alguien de esta compañía puede visitar a su propiedad y decir exactamente lo que está pasando.
Porque también tengo un árbol enfrente, entonces estaba pensando, ¿lo van a tener que quitar o...?
Imagino que no, pero no sé exactamente, vamos a tener que ver los planes, pero alguien puede visitar y ver el árbol y su propiedad y su dirección. Voy a asegurar que tenemos su información para agendar esta visita.
Ok, está bien, sí, gracias.
The question was just about something in particular, and so we'll work on that.
Here, the mayor, Jenner Street, people leaving, taking a left, taking a right on Jenner Street. The Tunstead Road, they're only doing like 50. Is there a way to put up like a sign that shows how fast they're going? Just something, or maybe just have a police presence there, because eventually there will be a high-speed crash there at some point. People just using it as a drag.
We've gotten a couple of those devices right about the speed feedback signs. So we can definitely take a look at it when we work there. But we do have those, and we're deploying around the city, and we can work with the police department, the DPW, and also in those particular locations. So that's great. Yeah.
Somebody mentioned the speed bumps. So I was in Winchester the other day, and they do have like really wide speed bumps on the streets. And I'm on Genesis, and that would be something, especially on Genesis, even along Genesis. They whip around that corner, just to slow them down. And it does, it just really, because they're not like these big, they're like wide, low profile, that just slow down the traffic.
Yeah, no, I think the other sound as well. Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Cynthia Renee, Euclid Ave, Lynn, for decades, my neighbor. A couple of observations from being here for this whole meeting. This gentleman over here who noted that the power center in the room, or diversity in the room, is not as great as the diversity of the city at large. And yeah, that is disappointing. And I say that as a mechanical engineer by education and profession, that there's still many gains to be made in public service and definitely in engineering. Another observation, congrats to Lynn for getting the money that's tied to the bike paths to the gentleman who waxed poetic about the Northern Strand. I've been on it, I agree with you, but they are still a pain in the butt for motorists. A lot of times you have the Twitter friends, super aggressive bike riders that are as bad as the massholes on the road. So I feel the pain on both sides of that, both as a cyclist and a motorist, but the bottom line is the money's tied to it. And if we have this cashola coming in, I would hope in the next meeting in the summer or whenever they could spring for some bottled water and some handouts. Because if we're getting that much cash, I think there's elderly people here. It's we're baking in an oven, and I would go for water and I would go for handouts, because when you donate time to come to a meeting like this, it would be nice to have those bullet points, not on some place where some elderly person has to go on a city website and look it up. My mom doesn't have internet, so I would make that point, make the effort to have some sort of tangible take-home, takeaway, that even if it's a brief assessment of what was discussed, I think it's helpful to have that to go home rather than have to go over to that not even Lynn table over there and try to figure out what's going on Euclid Ave or on Broadway. So that's just another piece of advice. I'll also say that I may be one of the few people who's been smacked off of her bike on Euclid Ave and lost a front tooth. A well-known official's son lived on Euclid a few houses up from me in a triple-decker and backed his car out. As we all know, none of us pull forward in. We always back our cars in. But he had pulled forward in, he was a young guy, and he backed out. And I was riding on the sidewalk, so this is the devil's advocate side of bike lanes, and we're packed in like sardines. There is no field of view. And he backed up his SUV and smacked me off of my bike right on the sidewalk. And I subsequently found out that it's illegal to ride on the sidewalk in Lynn. So my other option was to ride on my own street, Euclid Avenue, in very busy traffic. And my last observation is Euclid Avenue and the traffic on it. I am just opposite Minos Roast Beef, a few houses up. And once upon a time, when there was a Dairy Queen instead of a Walgreens in Wyoming Square, the end of my street, Euclid Avenue, had no light. It was just a free-for-all, but it seemed to work out pretty smoothly, in my opinion. And then a light was, the powers that be decided to put a light there, and now I have the benefit of mucho exhaust. I won't say 24/7, but cars are backed up to Verona and beyond, Connor Real Estate and beyond. And I get the benefit of this lovely exhaust, as well as my house is 100 years old. Horsehair and plaster walls, stained glass windows, cracks galore, ceiling and sides because of the 435 bus rumbling by, as well as all of this. And I'm sure folks will blame it on volume, that we've become so popular, that many people use Euclid, and there's so much more traffic in cars. But the fact is, if you're putting in lights, whatever you're doing, make sure that you keep it moving. We seem to have no trouble keeping the crotch rockets moving, and all of the Mario Andretti's that love to buzz down and drive at will, unfettered. But it seems like when we need to get the traffic moving and through the intersection and going, the flow is far from desirable.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Very, really, some great points. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
Just during the construction, the emergency vehicles, I'm sure there's a great plan about how they're going to get through to get to, you know.
Chris says yes. I'm very trustworthy. So we always emphasize, and it's a requirement in our contracts, that emergency vehicle access is maintained at all times. I'm working on a job right now where we're in a significant cut, it's like a 2-foot elevation difference, and there's constant communication. The police details, there's always police details on site. They know when apparatus is coming down the street. They make combinations of traffic with lane closures, et cetera, and allow emergency vehicle access through. So emergency vehicle access maintained at all times.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our officials here, everyone that helped answer questions, all of the police department, the fire department, everyone who's here. Want to make sure to remind you all to please share your contact information in the sign-up sheets and please go ahead and sign up. If you'd like someone to visit the property, we will put these slides on the city website. John, my chief of staff, has business cards up there if you'd like to talk to him directly, or feel free to reach out to my office and contact me or contact any one of us. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, for sharing your feedback. It improves the project, it really does. And I just really thank you all for your time and your passion to share that with all of you tonight. Thank you so much.